The word back to you, Marco, very quickly. So, welcome everyone to this community call. Thank you for joining us today. We have only two items on the agenda. One is to speak briefly about Mimir 2.4 release, and then we have question times if there is something you would like to discuss. And feel free to add more items to the agenda if you want. The link is in the chat. Let's also send it once again for new people. And let's start with Mimir 2.4 release. So Marco is actually responsible for doing this release. So Marco, please, would you like to mention some of the features in this release?
Sure. So we published the release candidate a couple of weeks ago. We are running this version in production since few days. And we've run in dev and staging for about a couple of weeks. We haven't noticed any issues, so the plan is to publish the stable release tomorrow. This release does not include any major feature compared to the previous ones. It's mostly, a set of announcements, few bug fixes. There are actually a couple of new features, not major ones. One is that we introduced another way to discover the query scheduler instances. So basically, the query scheduler is one of the components of a Mimir cluster, is one of the microservices. And previously, the only way to connect to the query scheduler was, configuring the DNS endpoint. So a domain name resolving to the query scheduler endpoints. Starting from this release, you can configure the query scheduler to join the ring, like it happens for the other components. And then the other components auto-discover the query scheduler instances through the ring. If you run Grafana Mimir using member list, basically gossiping the ring state as which is also the default configuration of Mimir. There's no extra configuration you have to do for using the ring-based service discovery for the query scheduler as well, except for enabling the feature, which is a single configuration option. We also introduced a new API endpoint, which exposes in a JSON format the limits applied to the authenticated tenants. So when you authenticate the request through this new API endpoint, the tenant which was authenticated in the request receive back all their own limits. This new API endpoint has been introduced by the community and can be used by automation built on top of Mimir. We introduced some new limits, including a new limit on the maximum range query length. By length, we mean the maximum time range in terms of and the timestamp minus start timestamp. And as any other limit in Mimir can be configured on a per tenant basis. Like it happened in the previous releases, we did a bunch of improvements to the Helm chart. The Helm chart nowadays is the way the majority of the community install install Mimir. Probably they also install Prometheus. We introduced topology spread constraints, basically to spread the replicas of the same microservices across multiple nodes. We introduced support for OpenShift route for basically the Nginx ingress, which we use to balance the request across multiple replicas of the same microservice. And there are other improvements as well, like improvements to the documentation, improvements to some anti-affinity rules, and so on. I think, Peter, that's the gist of the 2.4 release.
Well, there is one more important change, and that is the anonymous usage statistics tracking is enabled by default. So this has been coming for several releases. It was added, I think, 2 releases ago. But now it will be enabled by default. There is a link in the agenda to learn more about the feature, to see what exactly is tracking. There is basically no private information, just some statistics so that we know how the community uses Mimir. But there is also a flag to disable the feature if you are not comfortable running it with this stats tracking enabled. I think that concludes our Mimir 2.4 release agenda item. If there are questions, we can move on to open mic, which is also question time. So yeah, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions for either Mimir 2.4 or anything else Mimir related. And if you don't ask any questions, I will start asking questions about our community members. Before we started the meeting, we already asked Hervé. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. How you are using or planning to use Mimir? Rustin?
Who are the community members and who are the Grafana members here?
Oh, sorry. Basically, me, Marco, Arve, and Brian, we are all employees of Grafana Labs. And there is Hervé and Rustin, from what I can see, who are community members. So majority of people here is Grafana Labs people, which is usually the case in these meetings. Until now.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Rustin.
My name is Rustin, and yeah, actually, I'm just a contributor, not a Mimir user, because now I'm working for a company called PinCat. We built a distributed system called TiDB, and I'm very interested in Mimir, and I want to learn how to build a time series database. So I try to contribute to Mimir. Yeah. So I'm actually not a user, just a contributor, and I learn how to Mimir works. Yeah.
Well, you actually contributed.
Very good work. I have seen some of your PRs as well.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Is there some specific thing that you would like to learn more about the time series databases?
Yeah, recently I tried to learn how Mimir organize the service, because you use a very common pattern for your all components and all code, like use just a service and a manager. I try to understand how does it work, and yeah. Thank you.
Hervé, earlier, before we started the recording of this call, we were chatting, and you mentioned you have a complex setup. Is it something you could share with us? Like, what you're struggling with, if there's anything you're struggling with Prometheus today, so we could get a better idea if Mimir could be or not a good fit for you.
Yes. Okay. What would be great would be, we have a blog post explaining that. If I could find it, about Prometheus and our sharding, but yeah, basically, in a few words, we are sharding our Prometheus by cluster, because we generate a lot of clusters, and so we have one Prometheus per cluster, and then we have a small tool that's called Proxy that enables to query a whole set of clusters with one query, but I'm not really happy with it, because sometimes if we don't have if we don't give the specific cluster label, we may have some, let's say, wrong data. Like if we want to sum the list of resources from different clusters and we don't say something by cluster, some data may be overridden from one. We may just have one from the data from one cluster and not from all of them. So that is one problem, and the other problem is that we may have some quite different clusters in one group, what we call an installation, that will be basically for one customer most of the time, and meaning we may have one Kubernetes cluster with 5 nodes and another one with 100 nodes, and so it makes the size of the Prometheus quite different. And the one with 100 nodes will require 100 gigabytes of memory. And it means we need to, on the cluster that hosts our Prometheus, we need to have 100 gigabytes memory nodes when just for the Prometheus, and just because of sometimes of one Prometheus. And so I'm not really happy with that. I would prefer to have something that would balance itself across the cluster. So that's why I would like to have something that would be horizontally scalable rather than vertically scalable.
Right. The way we typically run Mimir is as a centralized cluster. So, for example, if you have multiple, I guess by cluster you mean Kubernetes cluster, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. I did not talk about the company, but we provide Kubernetes clusters. We manage Kubernetes cluster for other companies.
Yeah, I know a little bit Giant Swarm.
We have kind of a partnership. We even have a shared Slack channel, but I don't use it most of the time. I prefer to go through the community one. But
right. So, yeah, I was mentioning, you typically run Mimir as a centralized cluster, and then you configure Prometheus or the agent, and then I want to talk a little bit about the agent. To scrape the metrics in each of your Kubernetes clusters, they scrape the metric from their own local targets and then remote write the metrics to Mimir. And then when you want to run a query, you just point your Grafana or your preference client to Mimir, which exposes Prometheus API compatible endpoints, and you run the query against Mimir. So since Mimir, the centralized cluster, collects the metrics from all your Prometheus, when you run a query, you get a global view, right? You run a query across all the metrics. Mm-hmm.
That's what we're.
Mimir is also multi-tenant, so if you need to isolate the data between different internal teams or different customers, since you're also sort of a cloud provider, you could do it. You could do it as well. I wanted to mention the agent, and by agent in this case I mean the Grafana agent. Which is basically a sort of, stripped down version of Prometheus. Because the agent supports sharding as well. So what you could do is when you run the agent, you configure the agent runs in each Kubernetes cluster. And like Prometheus, scrape metrics from the configured targets and remote write the metrics to the centralized Mimir. But you could configure the agent in a cluster mode itself. So the agent as well, could be configured in cluster mode. And so you could horizontally shard the agent as well. So if you run 2 replicas of the agent, each agent will scrape half of the targets.
Okay. So it means for 100 cluster nodes, we don't we don't need to have only one agent. We could have like 3 or 4 ones just to share the
Exactly.
load. Okay, and for high availability also could be nice.
Yeah. You could also consider as an alternative to run the agent as a daemon set. So on each node. That's another alternative.
Okay, because the agent has also some options to natively scrape data from like databases or stuff that does not expose the data in a Prometheus format.
No, I think you still need the exporters, right?
Yeah.
It's got a few exporters baked in, like for Linux, but not much.
Yeah, but that's not what we are looking for. And I don't know if I want a daemon set. If I only need like four agents for a 100 nodes cluster, I don't want to put 100.
You would want the daemon set if you were doing logs.
Yeah, okay.
For metrics, at the end of the day, you end up with a very unbalanced load anyway, because you get something like cube state metrics, which exports, vast set of metrics, and that has to go to one place. So the daemon set is not a huge win for metrics. The sharding thing works pretty well, and then there's a thing where it tries to do a coordination ring. So don't use that. The very simple sharding that works.
Okay. To be honest, we used to have a lot of our Prometheuses where each one was scraping data from one cluster through the. So it was on a separate cluster, and we were going through the Kubernetes proxy, API proxy, and we are switching to a Prometheus agent mode, so that our customers can install some like service monitors and pod monitors by themselves. So that's what we are moving to that, and we know that it will enable us in the future to more easily change our Prometheuses to maybe Mimir or something else. But we are just in the beginning of our journey with the agent. And I had another question about the agent. As you mentioned, if I want to retrieve logs with the agent, I will need to have a daemon set. But I've read that I should have a different set of agent for logging and for metrics. I should not put all of the features in the same agent.
What kind of an answer are you looking for?
I don't know. Should I have one agent configured to retrieve the metrics and the logs, or should I have two sets of agents?
Like I said earlier, you almost certainly want a daemon set for the logs, but the daemon set is kind of unhelpful for metrics. So, I mean, it's kind of possible to get away with one agent doing everything, but that's more of a marketing thing. That I think you're better off configuring the things doing specific jobs, and then you can kind of track down if something goes wrong more easily.
Yeah, and I've had problems with debugging the agent also. That's why we for the moment I prefer to go with PromTail on one side and the agent for the metrics, and because we've had some issues with like service discovery that was failing, and we had no clear error messages with the agent. So yeah, good. So I guess then when we know better how to use it, we can change easily from PromTail to Grafana agent, or from Prometheus agent to Grafana agent. But I don't know, between Prometheus agent and Grafana agent, how to say, does it work like with PromTail, that Grafana agent is just encapsulates the features of Prometheus agent, or is it at the same level?
I'll carry on answering because I've been talking. Yeah, so by and large, Grafana Agent is bundling things that already exist, like Prometheus Agent and OpenTelemetry Collector, and a few more things like the node exporter and so on. So it's yeah, it's primarily pitched as a kind of ease of use feature for people who like Grafana Labs. It's what we use internally, but I don't think there's anything kind of extremely special internally. It's built out of open source components that you could also deploy yourself if you wanted to.
Yeah, but I mean, my problem is that with Prometheus Agent, I have a Prometheus UI. I can see the status of the service discovery. I can see a lot of stuff, and I can debug easily what is wrong. And I'm not sure I can have that with Grafana Agent.
Yeah, I think
okay.
right now Grafana Agent doesn't have an UI, but it's something. It's something in the roadmap. I don't know if the development.
Yeah, the flow, the flow stuff. But it's it's not based on the same configuration. We have to rewrite the configuration from scratch.
Oh no, yeah, I was mentioning a new UI since you mentioned when you run the Grafana agent, the agent also exposes an UI. Sorry, when you run the Prometheus agent, the agent exposes an UI. But when you run the Grafana agent, the agent doesn't have an UI. But I know the Grafana agent UI is in the roadmap.
Yeah, but I've heard about a Grafana agent UI that would help show kind of an interface about the interaction between the different scrapers and the way the data flows from scraping to.
You should probably show up to the Grafana Agent community meeting. We're like way off our territory right now, and there's people there who work on it every day and are really focused on on those things.
But the article you sent, Peter, that's exactly what I've seen, and it's not based on the same configuration, so it's not okay. It's not yet ready, and it will never be the same as Prometheus Agent. So that's why today we're based on Prometheus Agent for the moment, until we have until we know better. But okay. Anyway, as you said, that's not the point for this meetup. I try to remember what we said before. So the sharding thing and the way we could send data with remote writes to a central. Yeah, and the fact that it's multi-tenant. So I guess the multi-tenancy is done exactly the same way as with Loki, with the org ID in the headers.
Correct.
So it means we are working on developing a nice solution so that each customer has access to his data on Loki. So I guess once again, when we are done with Loki, we could use a lot of our Loki knowledge to go to Mimir.
Yeah, I think so. Mimir and Loki share a similar architecture. So if you are familiar with Loki and you want to adopt Mimir, you will find that the architecture of Mimir is very similar to Loki, both on the write path and the read path. Obviously, there are some differences, especially on the storage level. But again, Mimir uses an object storage to store the long-term data, like Loki. Even the header you just mentioned, the access scope org ID header, which is the header used to inject the tenant ID, is the same in Mimir. And Mimir and Loki, by the way, share a little bit of code as well. Or the hashring, which in Loki is used for sharding and replication and for service discovery as well. the same exact way. It works in Mimir. We actually share the same code, same library. So yeah, there are many things in common. And once you learn one of these, Tempo as well. Once you learn one of these, the other one share pretty much the same architecture. And at Grafana Labs, one of our goals, is to move forward, to provide, to continuously work to provide a better consistency between the three different databases, so that when you start adopting one and you want to adopt a second one, you will find a smooth path in front of you.
And that's really great, because when you talk about multi-tenancy, it's not easy to use multi-tenancy, and it's a little bit on purpose, I guess, because if we really want to have multi-tenancy, it's sold with Grafana Enterprise, Grafana Cloud. So right now we are building our multi-users gateway, and when it's ready, I guess we can use it with Tempo and with Loki and with Mimir.
Yeah. I would also like to mention that the gateway or proxy, how you prefer to call it, typically what it does is an authentication layer. And it's typically very coupled with your own infrastructure.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the reasons why there's no open source authentication gateway, is also because the use cases we see is that people typically need to bundle it with their own infrastructure. Like at Grafana Labs, we have a closed source one, but it's very coupled with the way we manage our customers and stuff like this. And the same happened for
and that's why what we plan to do will be, I guess it will be open source, but it won't be for any use for users out of Giant Swarm.
Yeah, I think the cool thing is that once you build this proxy, if you put this proxy in front of Mimir, it will basically just work. Because I guess will be a sort of HTTP proxy doing the authentication. And since the header is the same, just put it in front of Mimir and it will work.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
By the way, at Grafana Labs, we use the same proxy, the same authentication gateway for all our products, because they all work the same way. Right. Do you have any other question or any other topic you would like to talk about?
No, that's already far more than what I was expecting, because I did not even start my journey into Mimir. So
yeah, sure. Yeah, I think the only thing, obviously, I understand not a priority right now, but since you already run Prometheus or the agent, building a small-scale proof of concept shouldn't be much difficult. I mean, you install Mimir through the Helm charter, which is the easiest way to install it, and then you configure the remote write in one of your Prometheus, and you start writing data to Mimir.
Yeah.
What I like here about this approach, is that it's a very iterative approach. Like you start small, you start remote writing it maybe from a dev cluster or a staging cluster. You test from there, and once you're happy, you progressively roll out to production, one Prometheus at a time or one agent at a time. But yeah.
I definitely I have a lot of. It's quite clear in my mind. I'm not sure if everybody in my team is so optimistic, but we have a lot. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff to do, and like everybody, I guess we are running after time. So that's one of the main blocking point, but yeah, definitely want to try it as soon as possible.
Yeah, time is a precious resource for all of us. Nice. Rustin, are you still here? Is there anything else you want to cover?
No, thank you.
Well, thanks to you for all your contributions. And please keep pushing.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try it. Yeah.
Nice. So thank you very much for joining this call. See you on Slack.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye-bye.